Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of the end times. Today I want to talk about test tube babies and why I believe they are the Nephilim as described in the Old Testament. Jesus said that in these end times it would be as in the days of Noah. And that is why God is going to punish our generation. Now the sin which is described as afflicting the people of Noah's time was a sexual sin. And that is that the daughters of men were having intercourse with fallen angels. Now the results of these unions were called the Nephilim, or another word for them was giants. That does not mean they were physically giants necessarily. But God sent the flood to purge the world of these evil beings. Now when Jesus said that the end times would be as in the days of Noah, that doesn't mean that the Nephilim of today would be exactly the same as the Nephilim in the Old Testament. Jesus also said the end times would be as in the days of Lot. And the sins at the time of Noah and at the time of Lot were somewhat different. So we can assume that the sins of the end times would also be somewhat different. Jesus said it would be as in the days of Noah and Lot. Now the sin which results in test tube babies is the sin of masturbation, which is clearly condemned by God in Genesis chapter 38. Where it is referred to as the sin of Onan. Remember, God killed Onan for spilling his seed. But that is exactly what happens to create test tube babies. The man must spill his seed. Now, when I was doing research on this project, I tried to find as much as I could about test tube babies on the internet and on YouTube. Practically all the sites praised in vitro fertilization. But of course, practically all the sites were put up by scientists who make money off of the process. Each test tube baby costs their parents approximately $15,000. So I question whether the scientists who are putting up these videos are giving you an honest opinion. The only negative videos I found were on a site called These Last Days Ministries. Now this site presents the views of the Blessed Virgin Mary and Jesus himself as they were relayed to the seer Veronica Lucan at the Bayside Prophecies. Now I am personally a devotee of the Bayside Prophecies. I believe they are true. But I should note here that they are not approved by the Catholic Church. One of the most startling revelations of the prophecies at Bayside is that these test tube babies have no souls. Both Jesus and Mary call them soulless beings. And why shouldn't this be? The doctors give them bodies, but none of them have ever said that they give them souls. When Jesus says, it will be as in the days of Noah, are these test tube babies the Nephilim which he is referring to? Now I thought I would find at least a few videos by test tube babies themselves. Many of them are in their teens and 20s, and the first test tube baby, Louise Brown, is over 30. Of all the hundreds of thousands of test tube babies, however, only one has posted a video on YouTube, and her name is Test Tube Attiny. I thought that the video she posted was very revealing, and I have listed it in my favorites. She says twice on the video, "I'm not ordinary." She says it's hard to explain, but it's something inside of me. Now when she says inside of me, she does not mean her heart or her kidneys. She is referring to her soul. Outwardly, she is a very attractive young lady. But inwardly, she is telling us that she has problems. Another interesting feature of her video were some paintings that she made. The first of these paintings shows a man inside of a very large glass jar. obviously a reference to test tube babies. She calls this painting the banker. This man does not have an ordinary face. He has the snout of a pig. Obviously, test tube Attiny is depicting a demon. Her other painting is of a very fat cat sitting on a chair in front of a toilet. Strewn all over the floor is toilet paper, which the cat has evidently unraveled from the toilet roll. Another very unusual painting. I think the church has got to come to grips with the problem of these test tube babies. There are already 500,000 test tube babies worldwide. Now you can't expect the news media to give you an honest description of test tube babies. The news media is demonic. You can't expect the scientists who promote test tube babies to give you an honest evaluation. The Bible says that Noah was saved because he was perfect in his generations. Now these test tube babies are not perfect in their generations because they are the result of a grave sin, the sin of masturbation. But could the church provide souls for these test tube babies? Jesus gave his church all power in heaven and earth, the power to bind and loose. But the church must act very quickly, because soon the Antichrist will take over society and the false prophet will take over the church. And if you would like a free copy of my book, Revelation Unraveled, simply write to the address you see on your screen.